taking a first look at Bryan Johnson's product line. So this is the product line we already see. Who is Bryan Johnson? He's a former entrepreneur. He's still an entrepreneur, and therefore he has had a little bit of money, and he invested it mostly into trying to solve his health problem. Now, his health problem, he then actually realized, was mostly based on age, and therefore he is trying to currently reduce his biological aging speed or his biological age. So biological age would be the absolute number, and the aging speed would be the biological age divided by the chronological age. Now, in this process, he figured out some meals, and these meals are then what he is selling, basically. First of all, we will take a look at a picture which he has pinned on his X, which is former Twitter. Now, he is 3 years on Blueprint, and this is what he currently looks like. Now, he also has had some trouble, he said, trying to rejuvenate his hair, and he has not apparently had a hair transplant, but his skin seems to be younger and younger, or appear to be younger and younger, even though it, at some parts of his body, still looks like it is from an older man. Now, the idea behind biological age is mostly, or could be brought down to this: if you take a parameter such as VO2 max, for example, then people of different age usually have different values. Now, as these people get younger, usually these values get better. Now, better doesn't always mean higher or lower, but better could sometimes mean higher, sometimes lower, sometimes it's in the middle somewhere. With VO2 max, for example, his value of 58.7 milliliters per kilogram per minute seems to be under the top 1.5% of 18-year-olds, and 18-year-olds seem to be often the target group. Now, with strength, for example, it's a little bit different. With strength, strength seems to peak at age 25, maybe age 30 even, depending on when it actually happens. I actually don't have data on this or studied this specifically or read something on this specifically. He has 100 plus markers that are lower than his chronological age, which is about 45 or 46 at this point in time. And, well, he has some other decent parameters too. But now let's take a look at, first of all, what his diet looks like if it's not in product form. For this purpose, we take a look at protocol.bryanjohnson.org or .com, and this is his website where he showcases his protocol. Now, here we have the different meals. The first step is, there are just different meals. The first one is the Green Giant, which is not really a meal. It consists out of a few things, which we will shortly take a look at. Then we have the Super Veggie, the Nutty Pudding, and we have then additional third meals, which seem to rotate in some fashion. Now, the meals, let's get through them. Luckily, Bryan has now made a recipe guide with all the meals in them. So this is what they look like. We see the Super Veggie here on the upper left. Then we have the Nutty Pudding, and this would be an alternative third meal. Now, to the Nutty Pudding, he usually adds this chocolate flavanols, or whatever these chocolate chips are, but there seems to be no sugar in it, and they're also a very special kind of cocoa. And then we have olive oil on the left. Now, here we have some bigger things, and then we take a look at the actual meals themselves. So first of all, the Super Veggie consists out of black lentils. We also see cauliflower in there, mushrooms, clove, garlic, ginger roots. Then the Nutty Pudding is macadamia nut milk, but we also have ground walnuts, chia seeds, ground flaxseed, and Brazil nuts. Then the third meal that actually varies varies. So it could be sweet potatoes and chickpeas, but it also could be something else. This seems to be a sample meal here, the one that is actually also pictured. And then we have extra virgin olive oil, which we need maybe, and then we have an avocado or something similar as a sixth option. Now, these are the meals. In addition to these meals, Bryan also takes lots of supplements, and then he measures, and he has a cycle, which is measurement, and then after the measurement, what actually follows is kind of the classical management cycle, which kind of goes like this. We take a look at the data. So we measure something, then if the data is measured, then we can interpret the data, and then we take certain steps, and then we plan the data again, we measure, so we act basically. We could say act here, then measure here, interpret, act, measure, interpret. Now, of course, there are different variations of this cycle, but this seems to be kind of the process, which could be also described as a basic version of a scientific process. And obviously, he tries to be scientific in this endeavor. Now, let's get to the actual foods that he is trying then to sell. Now, what I've already seen is a nut butter, which consists out of walnuts and macadamia nuts. The product packages then look like this, apparently. And this is what he posted on X today or yesterday. Now, or a few days earlier. I can't remember. Now, we figured it out for you. Start blueprint now. There seem to be 3 different packs. And the first pack is olive oil. The olive oil is already selling and has been selling for a few weeks or months now. Then we have a longevity mix. Now, we cannot really see what is in this longevity mix because it is a little bit pixelated. This is the maximum resolution I could get of Twitter. Now, the next thing that he sells is essential capsules and essential soft shields. So we have capsules and soft shields. The soft shields probably hold something that is in liquid form, whereas the capsules can hold something that is not necessarily in liquid form. So basically we have 2 containers here. If this is actually not just a proxy for the final product, then this one pouch with this longevity mix, which could just be the green giant actually, and then the olive oil, which is kind of essential because you have to have kind of this very specific kind of olive oil, because only this specific kind of olive oil seems to have all the benefits that Bryan Johnson is talking about. Now, we have also the YOLO package. For those who don't know, YOLO means you only live once. And in here we have kind of the same stack as before, but in addition we now have the meals, but in powder form. Now, as other companies also already have sold meal shakes or similar things. For example, Huel has been selling meal shakes for, I think, years now, since about 2018. There seems to be something about the powder form which seems to be fairly efficient. And the something is, I think, this. Now, I've also tried a few meal shakes, and I've also thought about how to optimize my nutrition and how to not have to run to the grocery store that often, and so on and so forth. Now, in food, there is water. There's actually lots of water in some foods and less water in other foods. Nuts, for example, don't have that much water. Meat has a lot of water. Vegetables and fruits also have lots of water. Milk consists also mostly of water, and so on and so forth. So if you have a certain food, if you take out the volume that is 1:1, kilogram to milliliter, not kilogram to milliliter, but kilogram to liters and milliliters to grams, then because water has a density 1, if you take all of these different units, then you take out most of the weight. Let's say it's 99%, then this is the only thing that's left. Now the question is, if this is the only thing that's left, how does this influence digestion? How does this influence basically how the body then takes up these nutrients? And this is a question which I don't really know how to answer properly. I have had some problems with digesting meal shakes properly, maybe also because of the large quantities of vegetables that were in there, but I don't really know what to make of this. But it seems to be that if you need to ship large quantities of food, and especially if this needs to be a very special mix, then obviously taking out the water seems to be a very efficient step. Now the other question is, in which form kind of do you want the thing? And if you can drink it, it's super easy. Now for this reason of showing then something like this, or how something like this could look like in a practical implementation, I think Huel as a company did a fairly good job. And this is also the reason I tried mostly them and not all the other meal replacements last year. Now, they made a shaker, and there are also lots of other shakers out there. One of the main advantages of this one is that you cannot see through. So it doesn't look like a protein shaker, it just looks like a water bottle, basically. Now, ideally, this would not be branded, and this would also be better if I could show this in the videos without the Huel logo on it, and I also would prefer it to be mostly black. But where the idea of the powder again comes into place is if you have a powder and then you just add something that is a liquid and then you shake it, then you can drink it. So in terms of convenience, this is basically as convenient as it gets. Of course, there might be different arguments to whether this is the best best form of food, and whether you then are missing the chewing part, and whether the facial muscles then atrophy because they are not doing any endurance kind of work. Maybe you can replace the endurance kind of work with chewing gum and with maybe jaw trainers or chewing trainers, but that's another story. Now back to the blueprint starter protocol, or not starter protocol, but the starter set. So these are these 3 different meals. The first one is the super veggie, the second one is the nutty pudding, and the third one is not really something that has been on the list. So I haven't seen this blueberry and nut mix. Also, I question whether or which place the nut butter then has. Probably you need it for the nutty pudding, but ideally, or at least Bryan Johnson said on Twitter, that for all of these meals you then just have to add nut milk or normal milk. So he actually put the nut in braces, so you can probably also add normal milk. And then maybe the third meal is an approach that is also sweet, so it's kind of making the nutty pudding but an alternative version of the nutty pudding, because people seem to prefer this because it's sweet, and then making just kind of a different meal with also blueberries, which also happened to be in very many people's longevity diets. Now, we additionally have 2 different supplements, and one of these supplement boxes contains NAC, ginger and curcumin, and the other one we cannot read on here, but we can read it in the different one. And the third one would then probably also be the most expensive one. So this is for the ones who basically want to replicate Bryan Johnson's approach as closely as possible, or as maximally as possible, you could also say. Now, the images of the products are the same. We have basically the same products here, and also in this premium tier. I assume it would be a premium tier. Now, also another question is, what are these actives? I assume these are just an active compound, so maybe in the olive oil you have just the olive oil, but then in the super veggie, for example, you have something that is replacing the cauliflower, maybe a cauliflower powder. Now, there seem to be then other things that are added to this autonomous self-stack, which I don't know, maybe Bryan Johnson already plans to include blood work, for example, and then maybe tries to influence how the meals for a specific individual actually will look like. So you would have maybe the basis of these meals and of these supplements, but then what comes on top would ideally then be adjusted to the individual, as some people might be high in iron, for example, whereas other people might be deficient in iron. Therefore, taking just an iron supplement for all people might not be a good idea. So this is also maybe already addressing one of the key problems with a kind of a cookie cutter approach to something. Now, of course, there are many different cookie cutter approaches maybe to nutrition, and because nutrition is affecting so much, and well, there are different approaches and different people who try different approaches. The main problem is that a given individual at a given point in time has a certain nutrient requirement. Now, if you say, just eat this, and this might be also one of the main issues, at least I came to the conclusion after trying these different meal shakes, or I actually only tried Huel, that if I eat only one food, then I only have one food profile. And then my body, or my subconscious rather, who picks all of these foods kind of for me, at least given that I do not disturb this mechanism by introducing artificially enhanced foods. And by getting these out, I basically I'm giving my body the actual proper choice, and I'm using this algorithm embedded in me, which tells me whether eating a carrot now is better or eating a cucumber is better. And then if I am standing in front of a few different options, then I usually am able to choose the one that seems to then benefit me the most in a specific circumstance, which could be a time window of 10 minutes, it could be a time window of 2 hours. So for the next 2 hours, often I tend to like eating or drinking a curd shake with milk, for example, after a workout. But if it was a cardiovascular workout, then often I tend to avoid kind of the protein and go more for something that is a little bit higher in carbs, probably to replenish the carbs. And if you then have only one food option, only one food profile, then this algorithm maybe goes nowhere, and the only option would be to either eat more or less of the same thing. Now, this would be kind of the standard critique for something that is only one meal shake, kind of, that you drink every time you are hungry. Now, in here, we already, in Bryan Johnson's blueprint, and in these 3 different versions of the kits, we already have 3 different versions. But if you then have different kinds of meals, but each should be consumed in a 1 per day kind of fashion, then if you eat the nutty pudding of tomorrow, for example, and the delivery only comes every 30 days or every 3 months, because all of it is basically storable in the shelf and doesn't need to be refrigerated or something like this, then you might run into the problem that if you consume anything more than the frequency that is ideal or that is according to the protocol, then you might run into delivery issues, basically, or you might have to reorder. And this is already introducing another problem. Now, if you only have one single item, which might be a meal shake, then, of course, eating this is kind of the only option. But if you have multiple options, and then you might want something a little bit more compared to something else, and this liking might not be based on basically an actual need of the body, but much rather a need that is introduced by making the nutty pudding a little bit sweeter. And then your body tries basically to eat nutty pudding all day because it thinks there are more carbs in there. And this might lead to a suboptimal situation. Now, how Bryan Johnson combats this, I don't really know. But what is also maybe missing in lots of people that then might try this diet is a large social factor, you could say. Now, I wanna shortly again draw the feedback loop. Bryan Johnson, I would argue, has now established a really big feedback loop. And this feedback loop is him basically acting, and if he acts wrongly, if he eats cheeseburgers all day, then it will show up in the data, basically. As then the data is measured and then interpreted, and then, so there is basically a new plan, and there is also the measurement part. As all of these steps happen, basically every single action that Bryan Johnson makes that is not according to the protocol shows up eventually, at least if it is in some way captured. There is also another thing, which is the social accountability he has created by being basically on this diet and by saying, okay, this is the best diet we have come up with, and maybe you should also try this. He's putting himself on a very high pedestal. He's not putting himself on a pedestal, but he's basically using, whether this is intentional or just a side effect, he is using a large crowd to basically control his actions, because they then all say, okay, but you said this would be the optimal diet, but now you are 40 pounds overweight. How did this happen? Does the protocol even work? And I bought also into this. I spent hundreds of dollars last month buying this, and now you are obese or you are overweight. What is going on here? Or your hair is falling out. So basically, his responsibility for acting properly is very high. That's what I'm trying to say. And maybe if I or somebody else orders Blueprint and then eats nutty pudding all day because he doesn't like the super veggie, then this might be basically a suboptimal incentive, or one part of the social, not the social, but the structure that makes actually Bryan Johnson's protocol possible, which would be the social factor, but also the factor that he is actually measured, might miss in whether I am doing this or you are doing this or somebody else is doing this, and therefore lead to maybe a suboptimal outcome that would not be identifiable, the cause for this suboptimal outcome would not be immediately identifiable. That's what I'm trying to say, because Bryan Johnson is basically an N of 1 in this regard, because he is measured, and because he has this social accountability, and he has put himself in front of the crowds as kind of the head of Blueprint and as the head of this project. Now, this was a first look at what it should be coming, probably on January, at least according to him, and the bigger stack is set to be released in March, I think. That's at least what it says on here. We can take a look at it again. And I'm already thinking about whether I actually should maybe try this. And I might want to actually add another point, which would be, of course, now there's probably a pricing. This would be the low tier, this would be the medium tier, and this would be Andrew Huberman on the live stage. Let's see if we can get, this is another screenshot of a Marvel movie. Now, the medium tier would be basically the option most people probably choose. Probably also because this is then choice architectured this way, such that this would be basically the cheapest one, but you wouldn't get that much. So the middle option would probably seem as the best deal, and the high tier option would then be not sitting in a Huberman auditorium, but getting actually the 200 plus actives in a single day.